You're watching Northern Crimes.
There are places in the United States where stories settle in like fog, quiet, lingering, hard to shake. In the Pacific Northwest, mystery doesn't just live in the wilderness. It clings to the roads, the rivers, and the cabins hidden deep in the forest. This region has always been known for its isolation. Huge landscapes that swallow sound, and small towns where strangers pass through and sometimes never leave. It's here, against this backdrop of rugged isolation, that some of the most disturbing unsolved cases in North America have unfolded. Today, we explore 5 unsolved mysteries from the Pacific Northwest, each one marked by sudden disappearances, haunting clues, and answers that remain just out of reach. This is Northern Crimes. The Sierra Nevada mountains, remote, frozen, and unforgiving. On a cold February night in 1978, 5 young men vanished into these mountains. What followed was a trail of strange clues, chilling discoveries, and one of the most confounding mysteries in American history.
This case is bizarre as hell.
A chilling statement made by Yuba County Undersheriff Jack Beecham at the time. And decades later, no one has been able to prove him wrong. They were affectionately known as, quote, the boys. Ted Weiher, 32, was a former janitor with a kind heart. Jack Madruga, 30, a dependable Vietnam veteran who never let anyone else drive his Mercury Montego. Bill Sterling, 29, deeply religious and a loyal friend. Gary Mathias, 25, an Army vet, discharged after a diagnosis of schizophrenia. And Jackie Hewitt, 24, the youngest, quiet, cheerful, and inseparable from Ted. On February 24th, the group drove from Yuba City to Chico to attend a college basketball game. They were excited. Their own Special Olympics tournament was the next day. Their uniforms were laid out at home, but they never came back. 3 days later, a forest ranger discovered Madruga's Mercury Montego abandoned on a snow-covered mountain road in Plumas National Forest, 70 miles from home, in the opposite direction of their planned route. The car wasn't stuck badly. It had gas, no signs of damage, no reason to abandon it. But the keys were missing, and so were the men. Why had they driven up that remote mountain road? Why leave a perfectly running car? A witness named Joseph Shones later told police he saw what looked like a group of people, possibly a woman and a baby, walking in the snow near the car that same night. He'd suffered a mild heart attack while driving and had called for help, but the group, he said, ignored him. Investigators were left with more questions than answers. As winter turned to spring, searchers scoured the rugged terrain. In June, a group of motorcyclists stumbled upon a Forest Service trailer nearly 20 miles from the car. Inside was Ted Weiher's body. He'd been wrapped in sheets and appeared to have survived for up to 13 weeks. His beard had grown long. He had slowly starved to death, despite the fact that the trailer had food, heat, and matches. The propane tank was full. None of it had been used. Officer Lance Ayers.
All they had to do was turn that gas on. They'd have had heat.
Soon after, the remains of Sterling, Madruga, and Hewitt were found scattered in the woods, some partially consumed by animals. All were within a few miles of the trailer. Gary Mathias's sneakers were found inside, but he was never seen again. His body has never been found. What happened in those mountains? Were they chased there? Was it fear, confusion, or a mental health crisis that led them so far off course? Was someone else involved, or did the group simply become lost and disoriented in the snow? Jack Madruga's mother didn't believe it. I'm positive he never went up there on his own. He was either tricked or threatened. 47 years later, the Yuba County 5 case remains unsolved. In 2020, the Sheriff's Department officially classified Gary Mathias as a victim of foul play, yet no suspects have ever been named. 5 men drove into the mountains that night. 4 were found dead. 1 vanished without a trace. And whatever really happened in the frozen silence of the Plumas National Forest remains a mystery buried beneath the snow. April 12th, 1981. A 14-year-old girl opens the front door of her family's cabin and steps inside to a waking nightmare. Her mother, brother, and his friend lie brutally murdered. Her 12-year-old sister is missing, and the killers are long gone. This is the unsolved horror of Cabin 28, a case so savage, so haunting, that it would leave scars on the quiet mountain town of Keddie for decades. Sheila Sharp had spent the night at a neighbor's house. When she returned home the next morning, nothing could have prepared her for what she'd find. Inside Cabin 28, the bodies of her mother, Sue Sharp, her 15-year-old brother John, and John's 17-year-old friend Dana Wingate were bound with electrical cords and medical tape. They'd been bludgeoned, stabbed, and left in a scene so violent, investigators struggled to process it. Her 12-year-old sister, Tina, was gone, and even more chilling, Sheila's 2 younger brothers and a friend had slept through the entire ordeal in the next room. Somehow, the killers had spared them. The small town of Keddie was stunned. A quadruple crime scene, 3 victims found, 1 still missing, shattered any sense of safety in this former railroad resort community. Initial investigation focused on 2 men. Composite sketches were released, but their crude quality hindered identification. Rumors of cult activity and drug connections spread quickly, but Sheriff Doug Thomas dismissed those as speculation. For 3 years, there was no sign of Tina Sharp. Then, in April 1984, a shocking discovery. Her skull and bones were found near Feather Falls, over 60 miles from the cabin. The question was no longer just who killed the others, it was why take Tina so far? Suspicion increasingly centered on a man named Marty Smart, who lived just a few cabins down with his wife Marilyn. He shared the space with his friend, Bo Bede, an ex-con with rumored ties to organized crime in Chicago. Then came a letter, discovered years later. Marty had written to Marilyn shortly after the murders.
I've paid the price of your love, and now that I've brought it with 4 people's lives, you tell me we're through? Great. What else do you want?
A therapist would later claim that Smart had confessed to killing Sue and Tina, and that Tina had been targeted because she'd, quote, witnessed the whole thing. In 2016, the case took a dramatic turn. A hammer matching the one Smart claimed to have lost was pulled from a nearby pond, intentionally placed, according to investigators. Then came DNA evidence. In 2018, DNA found on a piece of tape at the original crime scene matched a known living suspect. Authorities wouldn't reveal the name, but said they believed people in Keddie still knew more than they were admitting. By then, the primary suspects were long dead. Bede died in 1988, Smart passed away in 2000, Cabin 28 was demolished in 2004, erasing the physical space, but not the memory of what happened there. Today, the case remains open but unresolved. Investigators say they've built a strong circumstantial case, but without a living suspect to prosecute, the mystery lingers. The murders at Cabin 28 are more than a true crime story. They're a tragedy that tore through a small mountain town, and a reminder that some answers, no matter how close, remain just out of reach. A burning car, a missing traveler, a killer impersonating his victim. In June 1988, 23-year-old Philip Fraser vanished while driving through the vast wilderness of Western Canada. Days later, his car was found torched. Weeks later, his body was found discarded in the woods. What happened in between is a chilling story of trust, deception, and a phantom hitchhiker who slipped away without a trace. Philip Fraser was the son of two prominent physicians in Anchorage, Alaska. Smart, idealistic, and independent, he was heading south to begin pre-med studies at Evergreen State College in Washington. On June 14th, he packed up his black Volkswagen Jetta and began the 2,300-mile journey down the Alaska Highway. 5 days later, that Jetta would be found engulfed in flames behind a car wash in Prince George, British Columbia. Philip was gone. The investigation quickly uncovered an unsettling series of events. On June 17th, Philip crossed the Canadian border at Beaver Creek, where custom agents confiscated 2 handguns he was carrying. The next day, he was seen near Dease Lake at a roadside cafe called 40 Mile Flats. Cafe owner Gay Frockledge noticed a strange man lurking nearby, a hitchhiker with an unsettling presence.
There was something wrong with him. I wasn't comfortable.
Philip initially drove away, but moments later, the man ran after his car. For reasons we may never understand, Philip stopped and let him in. It was the last time anyone saw him alive. 8 hours later, and 200 miles south, a couple named Eddie and Pauline Olson encountered a young man with car trouble on Highway 37. He was driving Philip's Jetta. The man claimed to be Philip Fraser. He said his parents were doctors in Anchorage and that he needed to get to Seattle for school. The Olsons offered him a place to sleep and food to eat, and he accepted. In the morning, he offered to sell them the car, but when Eddie Olson suggested they go to customs to verify the title, the man declined. He fixed the car and drove off. 12 hours later, that same car was found incinerated in Prince George. For 6 weeks, Philip's parents held on to hope. Then, on July 27th, tourists discovered his body near a gravel pullout in the woods, shot multiple times with a handgun. The killer had taken Philip's identity, stayed with strangers using his name, and burned his car to cover his tracks. The Olsons described the man in vivid detail. White, mid-20s, heavyset with a beer belly, unkempt, bad teeth, a chain smoker who held cigarettes in an unusual grip between his thumb and index finger. Despite composite sketches and media coverage, the hitchhiker was never identified. One theory pointed to Canadian serial killer Michael McGray, who murdered multiple people across the country during the 1980s and 90s, many of them hitchhikers, but McGray was officially ruled out. To this day, the killing of Philip Fraser remains unsolved. His killer may have disappeared into the endless wilderness, or blended into the next small town, the next roadside cafe, the next family's guest room. Sometimes, the real danger isn't hiding, it's asking for a ride. August 2nd, 1989. In the early morning hours, 4 members of the Jack family stepped into a truck with a stranger and vanished. No bodies, no vehicle, no evidence of where they went. More than 3 decades later, what happened that night remains one of the most chilling unsolved family disappearances in Canadian history. Ronald Jack was 26, recovering from a back injury and trying to support his young family. His wife, Doreen, also 26, stayed home with their two sons, 9-year-old Russell and 4-year-old Ryan. They lived modestly in Prince George, British Columbia, trying to make ends meet. On the evening of August 1st, Ronald went to the First Leader pub. There, he met a man who offered him and Doreen jobs at a logging camp near Klukol's Lake, about 40 miles west. The stranger claimed there was childcare at the site and the pay was decent. It must have sounded like a lifeline. Ronald made 2 calls that night, first to his brother at 1:16 a.m., and then to his parents in Burns Lake at 3:16 a.m. He told them they'd be back in 10 days, in time for Russell to start school. By 1:21 a.m., neighbors saw the entire family leaving their home, climbing into a dark-colored pickup truck with the man from the pub. They were never seen again. 3 weeks passed before anyone realized the family was gone. On August 25th, they were officially reported as disappeared. By then, the trail had gone cold. Without cell phones, GPS, or digital banking, investigators had few tools to follow their movements. RCMP Corporal Jennifer Cooper.
We were still using checks back then. There just wasn't a digital trail to follow.
Police released a description of the man last seen with the Jacks. Caucasian, 35 to 40 years old, tall and heavyset, with reddish-brown hair and a full beard. He wore a red plaid shirt, faded jeans, and unique work boots with leather fringes over the toes. But they were never found, and they never found the family. For 7 years, there was nothing. And then, in 1996, a strange call jolted the investigation. A man called police in Vanderhoof and said cryptically,
"The Jack family are buried in the south of Ranch."
The call lasted 10 seconds before the line went dead. It was traced to a house where a party had taken place, but the caller's identity was never determined. Despite hundreds of interviews and multiple searches, including a 2019 ground-penetrating radar scan of a Saiku's First Nation property, no trace of the Jacks has ever been found. Some believe they were lured into a human trafficking scheme. Others suspect a more personal predator, someone who staged the job offer to isolate and eliminate them. Doreen's mother disputes the idea of a, quote, nonviolent disappearance, calling that conclusion baseless. Her attorney, Ivan Pavlov, put it plainly.
"We contend that the investigation's findings are not based on factual circumstances."
Today, the case remains open. Investigators still receive tips, but without physical evidence and with time erasing memories, the odds of resolution grow dimmer each year. 4 people climbed into a stranger's truck on a summer night in 1989 and were never seen again. They remain in photographs, in memories, and in the quiet ache of those still searching for the truth. June 1989, Richmond, British Columbia. A utility worker finds the body of a woman behind an abandoned house, hogtied, strangled with a nylon stocking, her hands and feet bound behind her back. The victim was Cindy James, a 44-year-old nurse who'd spent 7 years telling police she was being stalked, harassed, and attacked. Now she was dead, and no one could agree. Was Cindy murdered by a phantom stalker, or had she staged an elaborate scheme where she took her own life? Cindy's nightmare began in 1982, just months after separating from her husband, psychiatrist Roy Makepeace. The phone calls were the first sign. Then came prowlers, slashed pillows, smashed lights, and threatening notes. She changed her name, moved homes, repainted her car, hired a private investigator, Ozzie Cabin. The threats only escalated. In 1983, Cindy was found in her backyard, unconscious, with a stocking tied tightly around her neck. In 1984, she was discovered on her living room floor, stabbed in the hand with a paring knife, a note pinned beneath it. Signs of animal abuse happened on her property, and the messages she received became more unhinged. Police investigated heavily. More than $1 million was spent, but during periods of 24-hour surveillance, no incidents occurred. Once officers left, the attacks resumed. By the mid-1980s, Cindy's mental health began to unravel. After a basement fire in 1986, she was hospitalized for depression and other psychiatric issues. Doctors ruled out psychosis, but acknowledged she was under immense psychological strain. Still, the incidents kept happening. In December 1985, she was found in a ditch 6 miles from home, dazed and wearing only a work boot and glove. Her neck was bound. She had no memory of how she got there. Then, on May 25, 1989, Cindy vanished. Her car was found parked at a mall. Inside were bloodstains and groceries still sitting on the passenger seat. Her wallet had been emptied and scattered beneath the vehicle. 2 weeks later, her body was discovered in the yard of an abandoned house. She'd been dead for days. Her hands and feet were tied behind her back. A nylon stocking was wrapped tightly around her neck. Toxicology showed a lethal dose of morphine and other sedatives, but no syringe was ever found at the scene. Her feet were clean, despite the fact that the house was over a mile from where her car had been parked. Something didn't add up. A coroner's inquest followed. Over 80 witnesses testified. The result? Cindy James's cause of death was ruled as the result of a, quote, unknown event. Further complicating matters, the U.S. mortuary preparing her body for burial reported unexplained injuries that weren't noted in the Canadian autopsy. To this day, theories are split. Some believe she was killed by someone with law enforcement connections, able to follow investigations, stay ahead of police, and manipulate evidence. Others argue she suffered from a complex psychological condition, possibly factitious disorder, that spiraled tragically out of control. What remains is the chilling paradox at the heart of this case. If Cindy staged everything herself, how did she die that way? And if she didn't, why was no one ever caught? Cindy James died in fear, just as she lived for the last 7 years of her life. Whether at the hands of an unknown predator or trapped in a terrifying delusion, her death leaves behind a mystery as twisted as the stalking that ended her life. A 7-year descent into fear, a death no one can explain, and a truth that never came. Out here, distance doesn't just separate places, it separates people from answers. The deeper you go, the quieter it gets, and in that quiet, stories go unknown. For the families of the missing, the murdered, and the unnamed, closure remains out of reach. And for those drawn to these cases, the search continues, not just for justice, but for understanding. Because sometimes it's not just the crime that haunts us, it's everything we never got to know.